In the meantime, you've had this Arab-Islamic Summit that's been taking place. And, I think a lot of people in the Arab and Muslim world believe that for the past 2 years, they've watched these leaders of almost every Arab country, with the exception of Yemen. You had Hezbollah in Lebanon, you had some other resistance groups, and then Iran striking back. That with the exception of those countries and political factions, the response from Arab countries has been limited to strongly worded statements. So I think there was some hope that something stronger was going to come out of it. At the end of the day, it didn't. All of these Arab leaders gathered, and they did a kind of version of what they always do, with strong condemnations, calling on the world to intervene. And so, in reality, to sum it up, what we've seen is that the United States either greenlit or permitted Israel to bomb Qatar, a country that houses U.S. Central Command, that Trump visited recently, that the U.S. says falls under a U.S. security umbrella. They allowed that strike to happen. They put together a nonsense cover story about Steve Witkoff trying to call Qatar to warn them, but he was a little bit too late in getting to them. And the message here is that there is nothing that any Arab country or Muslim country is going to do in response to Israel just torching the Middle East and even bombing Qatar, the lead mediator in the ceasefire negotiations.
Yeah, and Sharif, the Iraqi prime minister recently said something like, look, there's no reason why, we couldn't get together and put together a NATO-like security agreement among those of us here in the region, except, of course, there is a reason, and the reason is the United States and the power the United States has there. So what are the options available to governments beyond strongly worded statements, and what is it that prevents them from going further?
I mean, this has been a problem for decades, and we've seen an abandonment of the Palestinian cause by their Arab neighbors for decades, essentially starting with Egypt with its normalization agreement with Israel, which secured its it got Sinai back after losing the entire Sinai Peninsula in the 1967 war, engaged in another war with Israel in 1973 that ended, but Israel still occupied Sinai. And basically, Anwar al-Sadat, the Egyptian president at the time, in the Camp David Accords, which is like the cornerstone agreement for normalization with Israel in the region, agreed to sideline the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian question, in return for getting sovereignty back over Sinai. And ever since then, we've seen as a steady erosion that has gotten worse and worse with what, some countries like the Houthis and others call Arab Zionists, essentially falling further and further into the orbit of the United States, and falling further and further into the orbit of Israel, and essentially being allied with Israel in many ways. Now, a lot of these Arab leaders have to speak in the language of the Palestinian cause. Their populations overwhelmingly support Palestine and Palestinians and are against Zionism and Israeli colonial expansion. So you'll hear a lot of this rhetoric that Jeremy referred to and that we saw at this emergency summit in Doha, where there's a lot of bluster talking about how Israel is crossing red lines. They've said this stuff before, maybe not so vociferously, but actually there's no policy change whatsoever. If we look at Egypt, for example, Egypt went to war with Israel in 1948, in 1956, in 1967, and 1973. But since then, Egypt has been complicit in the siege on Gaza since 2007, helping to enforce the siege, destroying the tunnels that provided a lifeline to Gaza. It allows Israel to conduct covert air missions over Sinai. It treats Palestinians from Gaza with not just indignity and reserves kind of special measures for them. We've seen the UAE, as part of what's called the Abraham Accords, normalize relations with Israel in 2020 under the Trump administration, and before 2020, under the Trump administration, and they normalized in a way that no other country, Arab country, has. They have real cultural ties. very, very strong security ties, constant exchange of, there's many Israelis who visit Dubai, for example, and they've been at the forefront of this trend that we've been seeing. Jordan, for example, as well. We saw when Iran fired missiles in retaliation, targeting Tel Aviv, Jordan helped shoot down some of those missiles. And people were extremely angry at Jordan for not shooting down any missiles that Israel is hitting at Gaza. So, we're in the situation where, yes, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of bluster, there's talk of, a NATO force against it, but really only Yemen, Hezbollah, have really taken any action while everyone else has largely stood by. And right now we're watching as the endgame is happening in Gaza. This is the ultimate ethnic cleansing plan for Gaza City, the biggest, or what was once the biggest city in historic Palestine. And they're trying to cleanse it, and they're working on it, of 1 million people right now.